Flip the script.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Syracuse basketball gets a much-needed 75-66 win at Cal. I'm Jackson Holzer, and this is Locked On Syracuse, and thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. This is a post-game reaction podcast. The Orange got off to a really strong start and never looked back. Was this the best game that Syracuse played all season? Let me know right now your thoughts in the comment section below, because we're going to talk about it later on in this podcast. And then at the end, mission accomplished. The Orange went to California. I said they probably need a split on this trip, and they got exactly that. Before we get to everything here on this post-game reaction podcast, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So I got to start off this podcast talking about the massive NBA trade that we just got literally right after Syracuse beat Cal. And I have a funny story for you all, and I promise it relates to the game, okay? So in case you missed it, the Dallas Mavericks and the LA Lakers just made a blockbuster. To the Cliff Notes version, Luka Doncic is going to the Lakers and Anthony Davis is going to the Mavericks. Now, I am in a group chat with a bunch of Syracuse buddies that I went to school with, all right? So at the end of the Syracuse Cal game, I get a text in our group chat, and it's a WTF text in the chat. And I thought they were talking about Syracuse basketball beating Cal, because I thought that was a pretty surprising outcome that the Orange actually led wire to wire in this one. But I thought that was a funny story to bring up, because my goodness, what a massive trade that was. But anyway, let's now get to the game, all right? So this was the exact opposite of Syracuse and Stanford. The Orange, instead of falling behind 25-2, they actually flipped the script. Now, they didn't go up 25-2, but they set the tone right from the get-go, and it started on the very first offensive possession on the game for Syracuse basketball, led by Jair Davis. Because on the first possession, Jair Davis, he battles for an offensive rebound, he gets it, and even though Syracuse doesn't convert on that offensive possession, it set the tone for the game that the Orange were going to came out as the more desperate team in this one, and they got the win. The Orange come out scoring the first 9 points of the game, and at the break, they lead 40-23. That was maybe the best half Syracuse has played all season. The defense was lights out. They were mixing in some man, some zone, and Cal could not figure it out, particularly in that first half. They shot 4 of 23 from the field. That is just 17%. Now, Cal missed a couple of open shots in that first half, so it wasn't all Syracuse, but it was mostly Syracuse. They were smothering on the defensive end. And as far as the scoring, everyone got involved for Syracuse in that first half. There were 5 players that scored at least 5 points, and nobody had more than 7 points. J.J. Starling, he led the team with 7 points. Lucas Taylor had 7 points. Elijah Moore had 6. Jair Davis had 6. And Chris Bell had 5. Even Naheem McLeod got his first game action and had some quality minutes in the first half. He hadn't played since January 14th in the loss to Louisville, so it was good to see him back on the floor. So that was the first half. The first half was absolutely terrific for Syracuse basketball. But then the second half came, and adversity hit relatively quickly. Cal goes on an 11-0 run to cut within 7 points, less than 4 minutes into the second half. Jeremiah Wilkinson capped off that run with some ridiculous left wing 3. It was late in the shot clock. It was a good contest by Syracuse. The defense was fine on it. And the ball hit the back rim and just bounced right in. It got like stuck on that back rim, and it went in. And I just threw my arms up in the air and I said, is it really going to be one of those nights where Syracuse might actually blow this? Because that was the spark that Cal needed. They needed some ridiculous bounce. Well, not so fast, because J.J. Starling was there to calm everything down. He hits 2 big buckets to put Syracuse back up by 11 points. And then Jaquan Carlos hits a big-time three-pointer to put Syracuse back up 14. So after Cal cuts within 7, less than 4 minutes into the second half, in the blink of an eye, it's back up to 14. So the Orange, they took a Cal punch and they punch right back. They get that adversity and they respond in a positive way. And Cal, once again, credit to Cal. They did not quit in this game. They get back within 7 with 6:31 to go. But Syracuse responded once again. Lucas Taylor hit a big-time 3 that put the Orange up 13 with less than 2 minutes remaining. And honestly, the Orange, they closed out well up until really the minute mark where they couldn't break a full-court press to save their lives. But that's the only real gripe. They were hitting all their free throws. So overall, this was a wire-to-wire win for Syracuse basketball. And in my opinion, we'll get to it in just a moment, it was the best win for Syracuse basketball this season. And I think also this win demonstrates how important it is to get off to a good start. We saw in the Stanford game on Wednesday, the Orange were putrid in the first 10 minutes. But in the final 30 minutes of that game, they were actually pretty good. But you fell behind by 23 points. It's hard to overcome that. You have no margin for error when you fall behind by that much. And Syracuse didn't quit against Stanford. They battled, but they could not come back. And it was basically the opposite against Cal, except they had a terrific first 20 minutes. And no, they couldn't exactly replicate it in the second half. If you look at the second half breakdown, Cal outscored Syracuse 43-35. But that's why you get that big lead. Syracuse led by as much as 18 points in this game. So you can survive a little surge from Cal and still be okay. And know that if you punch back just by a little bit, you'll be back up by double digits in no time. So overall, a really nice win for Syracuse basketball. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below as the Orange beat Cal on the road 75-66. Now coming up, was this the best game that Syracuse has played this season? I'll answer I'll answer that for you next here on Locked On Syracuse. Stick with me. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans are unmatched. This year, Gametime makes it easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Gametime Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals and great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. And I used Gametime Picks to grab tickets for an upcoming playoff game, and it couldn't have been easier. I found a super deal that gave me incredible value for amazing seats, and I can even preview the view from my seat before buying. The all-in pricing is a game changer. No surprise fees at checkout, plus knowing my tickets are backed by the Gametime guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I'm Jackson Holzer, and this is Locked On Syracuse. And folks, if you enjoy what you are hearing, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Not only is it completely free, but it helps the channel grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And thank you to all those who continue to subscribe to Locked On Syracuse. The Orange take down Cal on the road 75-66. The Orange, they use their strong start, and they hold on tight in the end to beat Cal. And in my opinion, this was the best game that Syracuse basketball has played all season long. And if you agree or disagree with me, well, leave your thoughts on that in the comment section below. First off, it was by far and away their best start against a power conference opponent. And I don't even think it's particularly close. Syracuse led by as much as 18 in this one. They scored the first 9 points of the game. They really set the tone. And not only that, I think this is also important to point out. Syracuse really closed the first half strong. I was listening to the broadcast, and the broadcast was saying, and they weren't being slanted or anything. They were actually making a good point on this. It was the color commentary. It was Theo Pinson, I think it was who it was. He was saying that Cal's goal at the end of the first half should be to get within 10 points, which is a fair statement to make. But credit to Syracuse for actually extending their lead entering the first half. They didn't give up any of those cheapy buckets, and then J.J. Starling ends that first half with a three-pointer that puts Syracuse up 17. It was a marvelous first half, and it was a great game for Syracuse overall. As far as defensively, I talked about how Syracuse was really good in the first half, but don't let the second half point total fool you about Syracuse's defense. I actually thought it was pretty good in the second half, despite the fact that they let up 43 points. But if you look at the percentages, I mean, they weren't that great. Cal shot less than 40% from the field in the second half, and they shot 4 of 21 from three-point in the second half. So they weren't very efficient at all. So now you might be wondering, well, how did Cal score their points? How did they score their points in the second half? Well, it was at the free throw line. Syracuse was fouling a lot in this game. Cal went 11 of 14 from the free throw line in the second half, 24 of 30 for the game. So that's really where that's what kept Cal somewhat in the game. They were going to the free throw line a ton, and they were hitting their free throws at a relatively decent rate. I'm going to do the math right here for you. 24 of 30 is 80%. So you hit it at 80% clip, and you're going to the line that much, you're going to stay in the game. But overall, this was the best game that Syracuse played. They shot the ball better from 2. They shot the ball better from 3. Lucas Taylor led Syracuse basketball with 19 points, including that dagger 3 that I mentioned that put Syracuse up 13 with 1:47 left. I mean, Lucas Taylor, he had his best game in a while. 19 points, 5 of 8 from the field, 3 of 5 from three-point. JJ did his thing. He wasn't efficient from the field, but he still had 18 points. And overall, pretty balanced scoring. Jaquan Carlos, I thought, had a decent game aside from the very end in trying to break a full court press. He had 8 points. Solid, balanced win for Syracuse basketball. They out-rebounded Cal for the game. However, I mean, in the second half, Cal did get a lot of offensive rebounds, 13-4. As far as free throw shooting is concerned, since I talked about it with Cal, Syracuse was really good at the free throw line. They were 17 of 20, which is 85%. That's good, right? They only had 13 turnovers. I mean, I shouldn't say only 13 turnovers, but 13 turnovers is relatively respectable over the course of an entire game. And some of those came just at the very end in trying to break a full court press, which, look, that's one thing that Syracuse is probably going to need to work on, which is breaking a full court press at the end of a game when they are winning. It's probably the major gripe I have from this game. But overall, again, I think this was the best game that Syracuse basketball played all season. I don't really count any of the games against the mid-majors because, first of all, some of those mid-major games were actually very close. And as far as UAlbany and Bucknell, Cal's a better team, and they're on the road. So you factor everything in. They took some punches. They punched right back. Overall, there's not much negative things. I can't really say anything negative about this win. Let's put it that way. And it's nice to feel that way sometimes. I know this has not been a good season. It has not been a good year at all, but you know what? This was a big win, and we'll talk about it in the next segment here. So I feel pretty good, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. Once again, Syracuse basketball wins at Cal 75-66. They lead wire to wire in this one. And coming up, mission accomplished for Syracuse basketball. This was a really important win for Syracuse basketball. The Orange came out desperate and they got it done at Cal, 75-66. Now, Syracuse basketball, they flew into California, I believe, on Monday, and they were playing 2 games. They were playing Stanford on Wednesday and Cal on Saturday night. And I told you all, my opinion, that I think that Syracuse basketball, in order to put themselves in the best position to at least make the ACC tournament, they're probably going to need to at least split the California road trip. Just go 1-1. I will sign up for 1-1. I don't care who you beat. I don't care who you lose. Now, obviously, it would have made things a lot easier had they just beaten Stanford and then this game was house money. But they decided to make it a little bit more challenging. They lose to Stanford. And so this game, I didn't call it a must win, but it was an important game for Syracuse to have. And I will explain why in just a moment. Right now, Syracuse basketball as it stands is 4-7 in the ACC. That is a game and a half up on the third worst team in the conference. Once again, for those that don't know, there are 18 ACC teams and only 15 get to play in the ACC tournament. That means if you're in the bottom 3 of the ACC when all is said and done, sorry, no postseason basketball. That's right. And as I have told you all before on this podcast, this is not pro sports. There is no tanking. There's no failing for flag like what the Brooklyn Nets are doing in the NBA. If we're talking about the NBA at times here on this podcast, you might as well try to win. And so I want Syracuse basketball to make the ACC tournament. And now they are a game and a half up of the third worst team after this win. And what this win does is it creates a little bit of margin for error for Syracuse basketball. And by that, I mean margin for error against some of the bad teams in the ACC. Not to say that Syracuse basketball is like better than these teams, but let's just be honest. There's some other bad teams in the ACC. It's not just Syracuse. Don't worry. But Boston College at Miami, who, by the way, Miami won today. Miami won their first conference game of the season. I think it broke a 20-game conference drought for them. I mean, congratulations to Miami, but it just goes to show you that Miami can win basketball games. As bad as they are, they can win ACC games. NC State in absolute free fall right now. They've lost 6 straight games, but still, can they beat Syracuse on any given day? I would say yes. Virginia is the final game of the season. So overall, all 4 of those teams are not very good. But it's not a guarantee that Syracuse basketball against Boston College, at Miami, NC State, Virginia, it's not a guarantee they're going to go 4-0. Now, it would be awesome. And if they go 4-0, they'll be sitting here at least with 8 wins in the ACC, which would guarantee them in the ACC tournament. I don't know if it would be enough for a top 9 seed, but it would get them in the conference tournament for sure. But now you beat Cal, who's not a very good team. Let's just be honest. And they were missing their best player, Andrei Stojakovic. They're not a very good team, but they're at least on the tier of Syracuse or maybe a little bit below them after this one. So it was important. It was a swing game that Syracuse basketball really needed to help themselves in the ACC standings. I don't think they're safe yet. I don't think the Orange are safe to make the ACC tournament, but they are in much better shape. Much, much better shape, because had they lost this game to Cal, ladies and gentlemen, if they had lost to Cal, that would be bad, because the next game for Syracuse basketball, have you checked the schedule, who they're playing? I'll give you a hint if you haven't yet. They played North Carolina today. North Carolina is not very good, but it's a rivalry game. And you never know with those rivalry games. They can get finicky. And they annihilated them. And they have probably the number one pick on their roster in the upcoming NBA draft. That's right. I'm talking about Cooper Flagg and the Duke Blue Devils. They are coming to the Dome Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You think that Syracuse basketball is going to beat Duke? If they beat Duke, that is literally a miracle. I would put that up there with a miracle on ice if they were able to do that. They might enter that game as 20-point underdogs, which sounds crazy, but I think it's true. Seriously. But that's why this game was so important. Because had they lost to Cal, they would be 3-8 in the ACC heading into a matchup against Duke. Now you're 3-9. And then you play Boston College at home, who's going to be looking for revenge on you after you won on their home floor. You should be able to beat Boston College at home, but you want that margin for error. And now they have it after beating Cal. So this was a very important win for Syracuse basketball. 75-66 over Cal. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse. And I would love to hear from you in the comment section below your thoughts on this game. As far as what is coming up on the podcast in the future, tomorrow we got a One More Thing mini podcast. We are once again going to talk about Syracuse basketball against Cal. I'll listen to Adrian Autry in his post-game press conference and do something on that. And then, of course, throughout the week, we'll have full podcasts. So we'll mix in some football and some basketball. And like I said, the next Syracuse basketball game is on Wednesday against Duke at home at 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. Actually, literally, it's Sunday morning at this point. For your second listen, you can check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs keep it real, and they bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoy this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. And if you really enjoy it, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse so this channel can reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And I will see you all tomorrow to talk once again Syracuse basketball against Cal. Big time victory for the Orange.